I'm Luke, general contractor and small business owner, and you're watching another episode of Building Up. And today I have Leah joining me, and we are going to talk about how to avoid getting scammed. In light of the recent wildfires up in LA, with all the rebuilding and everything that's going on, it's really a busy time, and rebuilding, once they get it under control, that will be the next step. And there's a lot of scams that happen during that. So
so devastating.
So devastating. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you think people wouldn't prey on the devastation, but it just reminds me of the 2003 fires. Your parents lost their house.
Yep.
And what was the name of that fire? Do you remember?
That was the Cedar Fire.
Cedar Fire.
Yeah.
And we lost, 1,800 homes or something like that?
Overall, yeah, I think that whole fire.
During that fire.
1,800 homes. I mean, that like a fraction of what they've lost in LA so far. I think they're at 10,000 structures.
That's the last I heard.
Yeah.
It was like 36,000 acres, 10,000 structures.
Yeah.
10 fatalities.
Probably the worst in California history, if I'm not mistaken.
And it's not over.
Yeah.
And it made me think about in the 2003 fires, during the rebuilding period, there were a lot of scam contractors.
Right.
And it's not unique to just disasters, but it seems to me like they come out of the woodwork during that time. They see an opportunity to prey on these people. And if I remember correctly, they had to start a task force. Like they were doing sting operations. They were having they developed a team that would pose as a homeowner trying to rebuild, and they would actually catch unlicensed contractors or contractors doing illegal business.
Yep.
And they were fining or, I don't know, charging these people with crimes. And I would imagine this being tenfold, or maybe not quite tenfold, but, 8 times what they went through in 2003. And again in 2007.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just want to talk through, like, maybe it's a little bit early. I know that first we got to get these fires under control.
Absolutely.
Second, there's the cleanup and just...
Yeah, how long do you think it's going to take just to get those lots cleared out and get them ready to even be built on again?
It's a lot. It's a long process.
Because it's entire neighborhoods. It's not just a house here and there. It's like the entire neighborhood is flattened.
I know.
Just ash.
Yeah. And, you have to now ramp up a design.
Right.
Which takes time.
Yeah. And designers are going to be very busy.
Yep. So it's capacity of the local businesses there. Permit process. I mean, California sucks to build in.
Yeah.
It literally, I've heard it's one of the most difficult places to build on the planet Earth.
Yeah. All the regulations and red tape you have to go through. And
we just make it impossible for ourselves. I know in the 2003 fires, they were trying to expedite permits for
the burn victims, I say, but yes.
Yeah, the people who had lost their homes, they were expediting that. And then but I mean, here in California, we just bury ourselves in regulation, like you're saying. And so we've made it damn near impossible to build anything here. And now we have to build 10,000 homes. if people even want to build.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
mean-
it doesn't it start though with contacting the insurance company. I felt like my parents, that was the first thing that they did was
Yeah.
call the insurance company. They have to let them know, okay, yeah, our house was one of the ones that burned. And then from there, you start the process of having to, I mean, you have to go through and let them know every single thing that you've lost and the value behind it, just so you can get the money just to replace those items and rebuild. And
So daunting.
yes, it was a very daunting process for them.
If I remember too, the insurance companies would they'd have like on site in some of those major hard hit neighborhoods, people there. Cause I could imagine the volume. You're going to be on hold forever.
Yeah.
I mean, the claim process probably feels like a nightmare.
Oh, I bet they've already had tens of thousands of phone calls at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many implications to things like this. Obviously, you can never plan for something this, extreme, but, and it's heartbreaking because to some degree, some of this is exacerbated by our own doing, like the way that we run. I mean, our leadership, it just seems like they're inept, and this hopefully is a wake up call.
Yeah.
It seems like rather than learning from it, though, they tend to double down on it, make it about something else, I know a lot of people were talking about the water shortage. And I mean, here in Southern California, we just had 2 of the wettest years we've had in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And they didn't capture any of that water.
Right.
They just let it run into the ocean. And everybody goes, well, the fire's burning right next to the ocean. Why not use that? And I mean, the salt water's so corrosive, it destroys the equipment.
Yeah.
There's concerns of the salt content going into the soil and preventing future growth. And then contaminating bodies of fresh water, so
Right.
that
Yeah.
it can threaten wildlife.
What was the reason they didn't capture some of that water, the runoff in the water?
I don't know. I've been hearing for years that we're protecting the Delta smelt or whatever it's called, some fish.
The little fish.
Yeah, a little fish that likes to, I don't know, be in a little saltier of water or something. I have no
I
idea.
think I heard Elon say that.
Yeah, right? I think
He's happy in a little salt and a little fresh.
is that who was saying it?
I think so.
Well, I just know that they let all of the last 2 years of water just run into the ocean, and I think it was in the name of not
disturbing the smell.
Yeah. And then you can't fight the fires with the salt water because it'll disturb the fresh water and future growth.
Yeah. It sounds like they weren't very prepared. I mean,
Well,
what about control burns and clearing brush and just all those things that seem very obvious?
yeah, prioritizing that.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me like people get in this lulled to sleep kind of like, oh, it hasn't happened in 20 or 30 years or whatever it is, and so it won't happen. That's the belief.
Yeah.
I know in building, like we build, oftentimes we have to build to the 100-year extreme. So if it's happened in the last 100 years, that's what we measure it to. It's like, well, why are you building this for 120 mile an hour winds? We haven't seen winds over 20 miles an hour in 30 years. Well, because it can happen. And when it does, we don't want entire neighborhoods blowing over.
Yeah.
Right? So just because it hasn't happened for a long time doesn't mean it won't happen. And so I think leadership kind of goes, well, it's been great. We've been fine. We got things under control. Let's take our foot off the gas pedal. So I heard that they cut the fire budget in the state $100 million. They didn't have enough staff because they've been cutting budgets.
Reservoir The reservoirs were empty.
Yeah, dry in some
Yeah.
cases.
Fire hydrants dry. I mean,
Well, and that's the thing is, I was hearing that, these fire hydrants are designed to fight a structure fire or two, not battle an entire wildfire.
yeah.
So I don't know. I'm sure we'll be finding out more the breakdown of our systems. I know we learn a lot every time this happens.
Right.
And I know here in San Diego, since we had the back-to-back, the '03 and the '07 fires, we learned really quickly how to respond. And I mean, when something pops up, they knock it down so fast.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, they do an amazing job. We had a fire spark, what was that, 2 or 3 days ago in one of the areas that burned severely 20 years ago. And they knocked it down within an hour before it got to be this big deal. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I remember your parents' experience. It seemed like, one, it's very disorienting. One day you're at your home, the next day you're going back and it's just ash.
Yeah. You're a little bit in shock, I think,
Yeah.
going and visiting it and being like, okay, yesterday my house was here and today it's ash. And I just can't imagine how they were feeling at that time. I mean, it was the house I grew up in, but
I know. And I actually talked to your dad here
Yeah.
on the podcast, and he was saying they weren't planning on obviously losing their home.
no. And it was only one out of, or maybe there was two in their entire neighborhood that burned.
I think there's something like 12 houses on that little
So,
street,
Yeah.
and it just came right down the canyon,
Yeah.
across their house, and right back out of the canyon across one other house.
Yep.
And left all the other ones alone. Yeah, and you see some of the pictures of the devastation, and you see that lone standing house, and you're like, who wants to come back to that house? It's a war zone.
Yeah.
It's ash everywhere. I'm sure it's just a mess.
Right.
And then you're going to live in a construction zone for the next 2 years
Or more.
or more.
I mean, I think it could take a year even just to get your money from the insurance company. Do you
Well-
remember how long it took my parents to get?
Well, the problem is it's an unplanned project. So that means you have to ramp up your design.
Yeah.
So you weren't planning on building a house. You don't even know where to start. So once you get your bearings, you're like, oh, shoot, I better find a design team and a build team and ramp this up.
And that's where like making sure you don't get scammed comes in too.
Right, because you're frantically trying to find who's available too, because people are going to be swamped.
Yeah.
And you get all these people who are going to pop up sounding like they're going to, take care of you, expedite your project. And those are just, some of the stuff that we talk about and try and connect people with is the rules and regulation. If somebody's stepping outside of that stuff, that's your first red flag.
Yeah.
Don't give them any money up front.
Right.
They cannot charge you for materials not delivered and work not performed.
Right. It's
Now-
in our contract.
Right. And that's straight from the contractor state license board. But the weird thing is, here in San Diego, we've had this multitasker stealing money from people.
Speaking of scams, right?
Yeah. The last report I saw on that is it's over 100 people now
Wow.
scammed out of over $15 million. And what's really strange is because it's on that design side, they can bill for a larger portion up front. And then if they're offering financing, which was their hook, that's how they got people. If they're offering the financing, the bank can pay them in full because they're effectively financing the project. And so they can receive payment. It kind of falls under a different parameter.
Okay.
And so, I still think, I don't know, don't sign over your loan to your contractor.
Right.
Have it be connected to billable points. Have it be, in fund control or something, an escrow account where a third party has to release those funds based on progress still. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, as far as like how long it takes to get money, I mean, these insurance companies need to free people up to get things going.
Right.
You shouldn't have to get down to the minutia right now. You
Yeah.
can save that for later. You know, these are expensive homes. You know, you owe them a lot of money for the coverage that they've paid for. Cut them checks to start,
Yeah.
get started,
Yeah.
clear your lot. You know, I know a lot of people are going to think twice about whether or not they want to rebuild.
Yeah.
You know,
Or move on.
Yeah. So,
What would you recommend? Like if it were you lost your home, the entire neighborhood was ash, would you want to rebuild?
would I rebuild? I mean, yeah, I think so. It's your home still. It's, I mean, I get that there's going to be people that don't want to call it an opportunity, but it's going to offer the option that they didn't have before of like, well, do you want to pick here again?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to picture being displaced. I imagine communities, family, neighbors, friends, now you're kind of dispersed, right? And I mean, it's still your local area. It's still your home. I know the structure's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think I even heard that the kids weren't able to go to school. And so, like, your whole community is kind of displaced in a way. And so, I don't know, that would just be really tough. Where do you go from there? You've lost your home. You know, you're trying to find shelter somewhere, I'm sure. All these people are looking for somewhere to stay in the meantime and get back to some sort of normal, right? Families with kids and
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think that looks like?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, if you're going to rebuild, you want to be local and close. What's even available?
Right.
I'm trying to think how much of an impact the local fires that we had on supplies, you know, building materials, labor.
It was on a smaller scale too. This is much larger, so
Yeah.
it's going to affect building costs, I
I know
believe.
it's hard to picture the ripple effect on it
Yeah.
in years,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I know that we already have a housing shortage. We already have, so availability is going to be even more restricted. I mean, yeah, I'm sure we're going to have people that are going to want to leave the state and say, hey, I'm done with this. And I mean, I saw some people they had their insurance drop them weeks prior.
Gosh,
And so
can't even imagine.
I don't even know what happens to that.
No.
I know one thing that people, you know, I have people ask me in the insurance realm when they're renewing their policy or when they're buying a house, how much coverage to get. And I know with the increase in housing prices here, it was happening a lot where the expense of your house to rebuild it was moving so fast and people didn't revisit their policies.
Right.
So even with, I think there's something like an extension, right? It's either some are 25% above your policy, some are 50%, I think, above. So if you had $500,000, you know, total loss on your structure only, it would give you another $250,000.
You'd have $750 to rebuild.
You'd have $750 to rebuild. But what's happened with construction in the last 4 years or 5 years, so you're looking at, it's almost doubled.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm seeing some home values that you couldn't even build at what people are buying these at, because building is more expensive than buying an existing structure. It's all brand new. Usually you have different code enforcement stuff that's happening.
Right.
It's just a lot more expensive to build something today than it was, of course, 30 years ago, but even just 4 or 5 years ago. So I've seen people who are undercovered, even though you have, so you have the people that have no insurance that got dropped.
Right.
And even if you were super quick on trying to find a new policy, I mean, that stuff tends to take up to 5 to 7 days to find and quote and get, what do they call it? Get a binding policy in place. So you have no insurance, then you have underinsured, which means they're not going to get paid out enough.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
then
most people don't update their policy every year.
No,
and
they don't.
Think about, okay, well, if something were to happen, how much would I need to rebuild? And a lot of people don't even really know what the cost is to rebuild. So they're kind of guessing or going off their agent's recommendations or whatever. So
I know. And I heard one agent was telling people budget $300 a square foot. And I'm going,
that's not going to do it.
it's not going to even come close. Yeah, it's kind of hard when people aren't paying attention to that. Of course, your house is going up in value, and you're that's all just, you think it's nothing but good news. But part of the reason why your house is going up in value is the replacement cost of your house is also going up. It's worth more because it costs more. So if you look at new construction, it sets the market because that's what it costs to build a house today. And so new construction, of course it's new, so you kind of like prepaying maintenance, right? It doesn't need a bunch of work.
Right.
So that's nice. It's, there's that benefit. But yeah, new construction costs what it costs because it's built at today's price. So then if you have a home that was built 20 years ago, the reason why it's moving up is because to build that today, why would you buy a new construction home at $1 million if you could go buy a house that was built 20 years ago at 200?
Right.
You wouldn't.
No.
But so that the used homes, let's call it, I know that's like a car term, but like the older homes are going to go up trailing new construction, due in part, not completely, but replacement cost is a factor. The 2x4s that went in your wall in 1990 at 75 cents a stud or whatever they were, now that same 2x4 inside your wall to go buy it at the store is $5. So if it burns down, you're not going to go get it at 75 cents.
Right.
You're going to go get it at $5.
Yeah.
So if your home is appreciating, you should be looking at your insurance. You should be looking at, am I covered?
Yeah. So that's something that we all can do right now.
Right now. And yeah, once a year, you just revisit it.
Yeah.
That's a good point. It's something that you could do right now. And the other thing is, if you're doing an addition, if you're doing any project that's increasing the value, we tell all our clients, hey, you just added value to your home, you should call your insurance company. And even when we start a project, we recommend call and notify your insurance company so they know you're working on your house. Maybe there's some sort of extension coverage that you need for the construction process. I mean, our insurance covers our people and anything that we do or may cause on the property. But kind of an extreme example is there's been projects locally here where they're mid process and they get vandalized. Or an extreme case, Homeless people move into it, start a fire, and it burns down. So we're not there. The contractor's not on the job site. It's not our insurance. It's your insurance. So if you're doing a room addition and somebody is messing around in it after hours or whatever, and you're not aware of it, or I don't know, you're building new construction or something like that.
Yeah. Or you have certain materials on site, like
Yeah.
appliances that you're waiting to have installed, and then they get stolen.
Yep.
And that is through your insurance that covers it, not ours.
I know. Yeah, it's funny because we had that happen, and the expectation was that my insurance would cover it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't through our crew or during work hours or, because of our company on the project. And so it was ran through the homeowners insurance. So insurance is a big thing right now. California's been struggling with companies leaving the state, not wanting to cover fire.
That's why so many of these people probably had their insurance dropped, is because they're no longer covering California.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have had to go to the California Fair Plan, but many of these people hadn't gotten to that place yet. They had just been dropped.
I know. Yeah.
But okay, so let's say the people that have coverage that weren't dropped and lost their homes, what do you think that they need to do immediately just to start?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you're going to notify your insurance company of your loss. And I think these companies are aware. And I think you have to take inventory of what your game plan is. And I know that's hard. I know when we had the flood at our house that basically made our house uninhabitable. I mean, it was torn apart, every square inch of it, right? And there was a moment where it was like, well, do we just move? Because we're going to be homeless for a year. Do we just move? Or do we put it back together as inexpensively as possible and just move on? Or do we invest in it with our long-term plan of like, we wanted to do an addition, and it was like, well, we weren't going to do it for another 5 years, but it's now or never.
Time. Yeah.
So you have to take inventory really quickly. And that felt really hard because it's unclear on how to make that decision.
Yeah, and it's not something that's expected, so you're not already planning. So you're kind of just like thrust into this situation where you have to then make all these decisions, and it's hard.
So fast, too.
Yeah.
You got to, once you make that decision to just move. And then reaching out and starting to interview. And I feel like it's never too early to line your team up. If you I don't even know how the local companies are going to accommodate. I think outside builders are going to come in. I think large builders are going to come in. I think, as far as the supply chain, I hope it'll be all right and that there's not, people taking advantage of the situation. But I mean, don't let the kind of fog of war that is this just crazy situation cloud your decision-making process on who you go with, because there will be scams. And
it's super important to vet your contractor then.
yes, I mean, we talk about it all the time. It's so critical. It's not that hard. It does take a lot of your emotional energy and time of just kind of making sure you meet with all the right people.
Yeah.
You ask all the right questions. But, I always say in your gut, you'll know. But that's on top of doing your due diligence. It's not in lieu of,
Well, give us a quick rundown of vetting. What do people need to look for?
Well, especially with how crazy this is going to be, it's just the same thing we always say: check their license, check their references. Don't hire in this situation. Don't go hire somebody that says they can do it and all they do is, little cosmetic remodels. You don't want somebody building your home that is not well equipped, that hasn't done it before. But you don't want a monster builder you're just going to be another number, unless you're just trying to put something in place and move on. Because going back to your parents' fire, their neighbor never rebuilt.
No.
For years it sat, and it can kind of put you in a bad spot where now you're basically you got to clear the lot at some point. And then you're selling vacant land. And, I think that's going to be a harder sell, I guess, taking some raw vacant land and saying, hey, it's in a construction zone now, or war zone is what it looks like. It's gonna be unknown for some years how this is all gonna pan out, and somebody's gonna be taking a risk doing that. And then they can decide, and maybe that's a great option, because then they can plan for the project. Hey, I'm willing to do this, take this on. I already have another home. This will be, an investment project or step up home or whatever. But, some of these houses were high end houses.
Yes. A lot of celebrities lost their homes.
Yeah.
Nice homes.
Yeah.
Gone.
And these are long projects.
Yeah. Are there certain materials that you can use that could kind of combat, fire or flooding or, some of these extremes?
I mean, I was just talking to one of our team members the other day about how now we build with these materials that, the vents that have the spark arresters in them. There's a lot of different things that we do to mitigate this now. And especially in high fire zones, we're doing boxed eaves, a lot of tile roofs or things, or comp roofs. I think the tile roof, what's interesting is it seems like a lot more can get underneath certain types of tile. And so they're getting in there and lighting the paper on fire or whatever it is. But it really is like the ventilation, these attics breathe. So they're, for sure, there's inlets and outlets. So they're drawing air into the attic. And so when you have a fire and it's actually pulling in embers, that insulation goes really quickly. That's all it takes, right?
Yeah. I saw one home that it was the one standing in the whole neighborhood, and it looked like it had some sort of different material on the outside. And it was scorched, but it was not burned to the ground like everything else. So they must have used something like whatever you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, we're already, we're, of course, like if you're using like cementatious products like, hardy siding or stucco or things like that versus the old wood.
Yeah.
But so many buildings are moving away from that. It really is the ventilation. I mean, that's the number one thing that's changed in newer construction, is seeing those spark arresting attic vents, eave vents, all of that.
So would you recommend anyone building in California to put that in their new builds?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if it's not required in your area, it's cheap insurance. I've seen people retrofit them in after the fact, and I think that it's great. It's not that expensive. It's probably a do-it-yourself type of a thing if you're willing to do it, or you can, find somebody who does installs. But I think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We already have fire-rated materials on exterior buildings. I just think it's that ventilation factor. I think too, and we're not insurance experts, but just not taking the insurance's word for it, like on what has to happen, and just educating yourself on this process of cleanup and rebuild, and just, don't. I know it's overwhelming, but don't just outsource the information to somebody else feeding it to you. Go find this information. And I'm sure there's going to be so many resources. This is such a major thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it impacts San Diego.
Yeah. I think another thing too is you're going to get a number from your insurance company that they're going to want to pay you, and they put it in their system, but that's not necessarily what it's going to take to rebuild, right? I mean, you've seen that.
Yeah.
With people who've had a fire or a flood, and they go, well, insurance is going to give me this much, and this is my budget, and you're like, you got to go back and ask for more.
Sure, but I wouldn't let that prevent you from getting moving. Don't worry about that end number, because it's not like a lot of people think, oh, if I accept this check, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, there's supplementals along the way. In most, if not all, insurance policies, there's a code upgrade, up to a certain percentage, right? And it's not just the extension part, but it's like, hey, if today's soil engineers require deeper footings than your original 12-inch deep footings, now you need 24 or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
they will pay you a certain percentage above that. But those are things that your contractor can help you submit that paperwork. I mean, we've talked about the client that we helped rebuild their house that burned down after one of their...
A roof accident.
Yeah, the roofer caught their house on fire. And we helped them get kind of into that bucket that had code upgrade allotment. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to put together some paperwork that helped them capture some of that additional money. And, your contractor is just going to have to be your partner in this whole thing, because they're going to be dealing with the insurance companies. Normally, I would say, hey, we don't do insurance work, solely, in the sense that, some of these companies, their whole model is flood and fire, and it's just small little repair type work. But when you get into these larger, it's not necessarily just insurance work. These are the type of builds that you need a contractor. So these are the types of projects that we get involved in.
Yeah.
And, understandably, we're going to have to work with your insurance company. And it's a great thing to get that design build company like ours to go and just get the ball rolling right away. Mm-hmm. And work with the relationships at the building departments that we have. I mean, we would be able to go in and leverage some of those relationships and especially in a situation like this, they're going to fast track this stuff. I should hope. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, that's a crime. It's like they dropped the ball, and the regulation to go and rebuild these things needs to just be cut through.
Yeah, they'll fast track it as much as they can with 10,000 homes needing to be rebuilt. How fast can you go through that? Yeah,
I know. That's a lot.
Yeah. So those people who are proactive right now and just starting the process, they're going to be far ahead.
Yeah.
These other people who are kind of tiptoeing in and waiting. And
yeah, I'm telling you though, we're going to hear about people getting scammed through this.
Yeah.
And
that's super scary.
Yeah. So just beware out there. And if you're one of those, I mean, even if you're not in San Diego, you can call us. Mm-hmm. You can contact Woolsey Construction. We can consult. Yep. We can help you cut through some of this stuff and
absolutely
protect you from, getting taken advantage of. And it's sick, I know, but there's people out there that are going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why the 03s stick out to me. Not only did your parents lose their home and all your childhood memories and everything, but just watching how people came out and just were trying to capitalize on it.
Yeah, it brought out a lot of good in people and a lot of bad in people. So we had a lot of people that rallied around us and my parents and donated things and helped them do a sifting party, going through all their ashes and finding anything that, didn't completely burn. And so, it was really cool to see the community come together in that way. But then there was the scammers out there too. So yeah, you're going to see both sides.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then, thinking about, what to do first. I mean, I can't even imagine being in, your parents' shoes or these people's shoes of like just how devastating it is. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, just jump on it. Call
Yeah.
your insurance company, start researching builders, get a design build team. Don't just go grab a local drafter or architect. Get those people on board and get an advocate. Even get somebody working for you with the insurance company. It could be a nice go between.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say that, but it's like at some point you got to really hit the ground running though, because this isn't going to get any easier.
Yeah. I mean, you've got already the stress of probably trying to find housing while you're looking to rebuild. You're probably having to replace all of your clothing, all of your things,
Yeah.
finding a new school for your kids or whatever. So, you're already probably pretty tapped out, but
Yeah. Well, the thing too that I've heard a lot of people ram up against, and we almost did with our flood, and I've had a few other clients that almost ran up against their, whatever it is, the bucket that is, their displaced allotment, right? So you
Yeah.
only have so much money that goes towards rent,
right.
and usually it gives you about 12 to 18 months. So if you don't hurry, that clock is running. I mean, a lot of these people are probably in hotels and that's coming out of that bucket already.
Right.
They're going to get reimbursed for that. They're going to get covered, but that coverage runs out. It's not just a blank check. So you do have to be intentional about your game plan.
Yep.
And keep an eye on that as far as your budget is concerned, and know what that amount is. And you know what I'm saying? I just know that there's all these things that you're not thinking about, and then you think you have time, and then meanwhile the meter's running on your rental.
Right.
That's scary.
So organizing.
Yeah, get
Right away.
organized. I know it's hard.
Yeah.
It's like you gotta
Yeah. I feel for all those people.
pick yourself up by the bootstraps and get going, and it's like easier said than done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just encourage people to get connected with somebody that's going to have their back. And, if we can offer that as help,
Yeah.
that's one thing we can do from, for our neighbors, right? I mean, they're not that far north from us, and look at policies, look at, designers and various people that can help you. I mean, that's one nice thing is designers can design from anywhere. So you can get anybody in the state to design, which is pretty cool. So that you can tap into those resources.
Yeah.
It's really going to be local builders that are going to be taxed.
Yeah.
And
materials.
And materials. Yeah, unless some larger companies come in. But yeah, that'd be really cool if we were able to help some people through this, advise and have their back and make it a little less painful.
Yeah. And I think we know what these people are going through, maybe not completely directly, but having been through it with my parents and then having been through a total loss with the house flood, I think we can empathize. So
Yeah. So, well, hopefully that's helpful. I if somebody can hear this, that it saves them just a little bit of headache through the process. And then also, on the other side of it, talking to your dad here, he doesn't remember all those things that he lost.
Yeah.
And I know that you can't hear that right now, but he's 22 years later and he's not thinking about all that stuff. You'll get through it. And, it's just going through the process, I guess, and just the emotions of it. But there is the other side.
Yeah.
And that other side, I know with your dad, they built their dream home. They loved that place. And they had a lot of great memories built in that house, after.
Yep.
And just such a cool gift after the 2 years of just, craziness that they went through.
Yeah.
So it's pretty awesome. But
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this helps, and we'll continue to be thinking and praying about all those people and available if they need us.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Leah.